because I wanted to exaggerate one thing, that you cannot have innovation without massive investments from the private sector. And this is an answer actually to your first comment, which I fully agree when you say that we go 2 steps forward and 3 steps backward. Yes. And this is happening because the tourism businesses are reactive, are not proactive, and are reactive mainly because they are not manufacturing, they are not ITC, but they're always reactive. They say, okay, now we will do this, since this happened. I strongly believe green innovation in tourism will come the day that one of the big 100s in the accommodation or in the transportation sector, they will decide to massively invest maybe the amount that you mentioned that the French government is investing, 2.5% of their annual cycle on some green innovation. And I do believe that it is private innovation, it's innovation from the private sector that it will drive the green tourism. But I do agree with you, it's not happening at the level that it should happen. And the day that it will happen at this level, I think we should say that the tourism industry now, it's not reactive, but it's proactive and it's leading the way. And another comment on the nature of the tourism industry. It's mainly a service provision industry that it depends in a very extensive supply chain. In a very extensive supply chain that starts from food processing to luxury service provision. So we are talking mostly about service innovation and, about process innovation and about how, as a big influencer of the value chain, tourism can affect some other industries also, as the local food industry or the local transportation industry.
Thanks, Stefanos. We've got about 5 minutes left, 10 minutes left for this discussion. I'd like to hand the floor over to from the Ministry of Tourism Morocco, please.
Thank you. Je vais parler en français. Donc, je voudrais poser une question sur l'expérience en fait au niveau de la Thaïlande auprès donc de groupes d'hôteliers, parce que nous avons un projet un peu similaire. Nous avons mené un projet un peu similaire auprès d'une trentaine d'hôteliers au Maroc. Bon, la différence, c'est que nous n'avons pas travaillé sur un logiciel, mais sur un guide de bonne pratique. Nous avons fait la même démarche de formation, de sensibilisation, puis d'accompagnement sur site. Je voulais poser la question sur les perspectives que vous voyez de ce projet. Est-ce que vous envisagez une suite à ce projet en termes donc d'accompagnement d'opérateurs qui veulent aller plus loin, parce qu'il s'agissait vraiment de favoriser l'initiative en matière donc, de démarche environnementale. Donc c'est plutôt des bonnes pratiques qu'on a initiées. Est-ce qu'on pense à accompagner des gens qui sont intéressés à aller au-delà dans une démarche de certification? Donc est-ce qu'il y a un programme prévu? Et également en termes d'ouverture, nous avons aussi pensé à mettre en place des actions groupées, donc avec des hôtels qui voudraient faire ensemble des actions groupées par rapport à l'introduction de technologies vertes, la gestion de déchets ou autres problématiques qui peuvent être transverses à un groupe d'hôteliers dans la même région ou à un groupe d'hôteliers tout court. Et j'avais aussi une question par rapport à l'expérience française sur l'étiquetage. Je voulais savoir un peu, est-ce que vous avez également sondé dans le cadre de cette expérience l'opinion du client par rapport à cette étiquette, comment est-ce qu'il l'aperçoit, est-ce que ça influencerait éventuellement son acte d'achat ou pas, est-ce que c'est pas trop complexe pour un client en termes de lisibilité dans le processus d'achat, est-ce que cette étiquette ferait partie également des choses qu'on irait consulter sur TripAdvisor ou d'autres sites de ce style-là et qui pourraient influencer notre décision d'achat? Merci.
Okay, Saishan, would you take that first and then Hubert, please?
Thank you. From my experience that we have worked on this project, I think the small hotel that we trained didn't ask much about all the things that you just mentioned, like a certificate or something. But I met with many hotels. They asked about this also. If Kinan could do this, Kinan could not do this. Kinan could not certify this. It had to be the government to do that. At present, Tourism Authority of Thailand has issued a certificate like a green leaf, and also Department of Export Promotion have another certificate also. They try to convince all the hotel operators to follow on the standards so they can receive all these things, and the government could market the hotel in Thailand also. But as I mentioned, although they have this, they have a standards, and the small hotel could not follow the standard because they need coaching and training how to follow this standard, how to achieve this. So that's the thing that I think the government need to give money to fund the project for us, right? To help the small hotel to get the certificate. So, but the project that we receive fund from City Foundation, because City Foundation had project called CSR, and then we talked to City about this project that we want to do this, and they bought the idea, and after the evaluation, it turned out to be successful. So they fund the second phase for this project starting this year. So that's what I think. There's possibility that we could replicate or expand the project.
Thank you. Hubert, could you take the answer on the consumer feedback on your system?
Oui, donc, je ne vous vois pas si je parle dans le micro. Donc, il y a une enquête client qui est prévue dans le projet. Il y a deux types d'enquêtes. Il y a eu des focus group que l'on a menés en janvier. L'idée était de faire réagir une communauté de clients potentiels devant l'étiquette. Et il y a une deuxième phase qu'on va lancer en mars-avril qui va être un sondage sur 50 clients par hôtel participant. Donc ça commence à faire un bon panel de 750 personnes. L'idée étant de les faire réagir sur l'étiquette. Alors les premières conclusions du focus group, c'est qu'ils arrivent à bien comprendre l'étiquette, hormis peut-être le pictogramme lié au CO2, au changement climatique, et le pictogramme avec le cœur sur les pourcentages de produits bio. Il apparaît aussi que le choix environnemental apparaît après, bien sûr, les prix, la situation géographique et la catégorie de l'hôtel. Mais ce qui est vrai également, c'est que pour l'instant, on a une opération sur 17 hôtels en France, sachant que on n'a pas une densité assez forte au même endroit pour avoir un vrai retour consommateur, même si à Nantes, on est à peu près à 8 hôtels. Donc ce qui est en train de se passer, c'est qu'on lance cette opération-là sur 2 départements. Un département qui compte une trentaine d'hôtels espère étiqueter au moins 20 hôtels. Et là, on aimerait bien avoir un vrai retour consommateur. Est-ce que ça joue 2 hôtels dans la même rue, à peu près la même catégorie? Est-ce qu'on va avoir vraiment un choix du consommateur? En revanche, on a déjà des retours hôteliers qui nous disent que c'est une vraie compétition entre eux, parce qu'ils s'aiment bien, ils s'apprécient entre eux. Et c'est un peu un jeu pour qu'ils aient la meilleure note. Donc là, on a obtenu une émulation à ce niveau-là. On ne s'attendait pas vraiment.
Okay, there's 3 questions left. I'll only take those 3 questions. Please, could you keep them brief? Thank you very much. The lady at the back, please.
네, 감사합니다. 저는 생태지평연구소 에코호라이즌 인스티튜트에서 일하고 있습니다. 오늘 좋은 사례 많이 들어서 좋은 정보를 얻었는데 좋은 사례를 통해서 교훈을 얻는 것뿐만 아니라 나쁜 사례를 통해서도 교훈을 얻을 수 있다고 생각합니다. 오전 세션에서 보전과 지속가능한 관광의 연계성에 대해서 좋은 발표들을 들었는데요. 근데 나쁜 보전이 아닌 파괴를 통해서 지속가능한 관광을 이루려고 하는 사례도 많습니다. 대표적으로 조금 전에 언급되었던 새만금 사업 같은 경우에는 호주와 시베리아를 오가는 물새들에게는 거의 최악의 그 서식처를 파괴하는 사업이었습니다. 그래서 현재 그 오고 간 새들의 절반 이상이 더 이상 그 새만금 갯벌을 찾아오지 않는 상황이 벌어지고 있는데 그것과 관련된 조사도 NGO 베이스 이외에는 정부 사이드에서는 조사가 이루어지지 않고 있는 것으로 알고 있습니다. 또 한 가지는 2008년도에 창원에서 있었던 람사회의 이후에 바로 그다음 2009년부터 한국에서는 4대강 사업이라는 그 대규모 국책 사업이 정부에 의해서 추진되고 있습니다. 이 사업은 단 3년 만에 거의 700km 이상의 그 4개의 강에서 16개의 댐을 건설하고 준설을 하고 주변에 하천 주변은 또 인공적인 공원으로 만들고 있습니다. 이 공원에는 또 자전거 도로들이 생태 관광을 위해서 만들어지고 있는데요. 이런 나쁜 사례들이 지속 가능한 관광이라는 명목 하에서 이루어지고 있고 그런 사례들이 오히려 외국에는 좋은 사례로 또 발표되는 경우도 있어서 한국에 있는 NGO들은 대단히 우려하고 있습니다. 그래서 이번 심포지엄과 같은 또는 UNEP 차원에서 이루어지고 있는 지속가능한 관광 파트너십 자체에서도 이런 나쁜 사례들이 지속가능한 관광의 좋은 사례로 다루어지거나 아니면 그 지속가능한 관광의 가이드라인이 명확하게 각 국가별로 제시되어서 좀 더 좋은 사례들을 확대하고 이런 지속가능하지 않은 관광들이 좀 저지될 수 있도록 그런 역할을 해주시기를 부탁드립니다. 감사합니다.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to take that as a comment. Can I take the next gentleman before Harold as the last question, please? If there's a microphone to come to the fourth row down, please, quickly. Could I give it to him first, please? Yeah, thank you very much. Just to keep the order here. Thank you. Could you keep it brief, please, because we'd like to wrap up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gordon, that give me opportunity to have the question. Actually, I would like to ask Dr. Stefanos to elaborate a little bit regarding to the policy of UNEP concerning to tourism services. Actually, in my country, some NGO, non-government organization, they try to get benefit from the tourism side. So, in this connection, could I have the experience from you, how much the tourism services contributes to the environmental impacts? And my last question concerning to Major Park, how could you manage the market of tourism concerning sustainable tourism? There should be balanced tourist destination. Currently, my experience and my destination in Angkor Wat, there are a lot of advice from our expert to be managed the number of tourists. At least one day should be allow only 5,000 visitors, but currently we are overlaps more than 10,000 per day. So how could we get the experience, how we could manage the tourists in terms of the number of tourists in the ecotourism side? Thank you very much.
Okay, could I give you 1 minute each to answer those questions, please?
Okay, the answer could be very long. First of all, UNEP does not have a policy, but we have policy recommendations. And we have published them many years ago, and also within the International Task Force on Sustainable Tourism, we have a set of policy recommendations for sustainable tourism that they are available to the public, and you can see them. But on your specific question about environmental impact, I think the most important concept there when it comes to tourism destinations is the tourism carrying capacity. And the environmental impact and the main, I think, recommendation could be given, and it is part of the policy recommendations, is that when you design the tourism development of a destination, do first an assessment of the tourism carrying capacity. That includes, of course, social but also environmental issues, and then proceed with the development.
Okay, thanks, Stefanos. Could you answer the carrying capacity one quickly as well, please?
예, 아까 발표에서도 잠깐 그 말씀을 드린 것 같습니다. 지금 현재 한국에서는 국립공원 같은 경우에는 예약 탐방제 같은 거를 인터넷을 통해서 미리 이렇게 예약을 받아가지고 숫자를 이렇게 예측도 하고 또 그런 쪽에 활용을 하고 있고 국립공원 같은 경우에는 중요 지역 같은 경우에는 뭐 2, 3년씩 이렇게 휴식을 취하는 이제 그런 제도들을 운영을 하고 있습니다. 이제 더 나아가서는 저희가 아직 법제화를 법으로서 어떤 그런 제도들을 이제 만들려고 하는 부분은 이런 그 프로그램상 이제 그런 것들을 다 고려해서 지속 가능한 그 프로그램이나 그런 지역에 대해서는 인증을 해주는 이제 그런 것들을 지금 시도를 하고 있습니다. 아직 이제 법제화는 되진 않았는데요. 이런 부분을 통해서 우리가 훼손을 방지하는 노력을 하고 있습니다.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last question, please, from Mr. Goodwin. Thank you.
Hubert, the question's for you. I really wanted to ask whether you knew of other examples where a concentration of hotels in a particular city or region were engaging in this kind of labelling. There's something similar in Cape Town happening at the moment, and I suspect that it's going to drive good practice because hotels won't be able to stand aside once their major competitors in the same destination are in the system. They'll all need to be in.
Hubert? Okay.
C'est plutôt une bonne chose. Je pense qu'il y a des expérimentations qui se passent dans différents pays. En revanche, il convient d'harmoniser les choses. Et je vais dire que c'est à peu près la même chose pour les labels également. Il y avait une étude qui était sortie qui nous disait que sur le tourisme, on avait plus de 100 écolabels différents au monde. Donc on ne sait pas toujours s'y retrouver. En revanche, moi, j'apprécierais très fortement de diffuser notre méthodologie et de croiser les choses pour pouvoir harmoniser peut-être les périmètres, peut-être arriver presque sur une norme ou un standard. Je crois que l'ITC cherche à standardiser les choses autour de l'aspect carbone, donc c'est plutôt une bonne chose, au contraire. Je ne sais pas si j'ai répondu à la question.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to... Okay. Well, I'll leave the full answer till later. I'm just going to wrap up here. I thank the panelists very much. Before I say that, just to add a very brief comment in terms of my experience in Europe here to this discussion, that green innovation in tourism requires the process of regional clustering of stakeholders, which I would like to add to this in order to share that knowledge and to ensure that knowledge transfer and the knowledge base and the knowledge economy are also considered within this discussion as we continue. But thank you very much for the panelists to introduce those ideas such as investment, good practice transfer, as I said, and the training to produce more innovation. And so, round of applause for the panelists, please. Thank you. Okay. And I believe I'd like to invite Mr. Hoballah to do the concluding remarks soon.
I believe that you prefer that I just say very few words and then you will be relieved. The bad news is that I have something to say, and I ask you to be patient for some 10 minutes, but I will not take the 20 minutes I was given. Summarizing a whole day like that is not easy. It has been very rich. So don't take every word as a decision. My colleagues will try to summarize it much better later on in the minutes. First of all, tourism and conservation. We learn very clearly that conservation needs tourism, and tourism is essential for conservation. Tourism and poverty. Tourism can help alleviate poverty, but is not working everywhere. And in both cases, we need innovation. This could have been a good summary, and I should stop there. But I will need a bit more time. Now, I think to be faced with what has been said, it's important to highlight some of the major elements that we'll try to put in order somehow, and from which we'll be drawing some lessons and ideas for the program of work of the partnership project ideas, partnerships, and so on. The tourism does support conservation, but it has to do it through the systems that do exist in the countries and not to upset them. We need for that appropriate communication tools in order to show properly the links between tourism and conservation. But in order to do so and to ensure conservation, we need adequate incentives for replication and upscaling. Unfortunately, we lack the adequate understanding between the links, and therefore we need certain number of environmental and socioeconomic indicators to see how we can better follow this preservation and maintain the tourism in the sectors. This will absolutely require close partnerships between the different stakeholders, including the UN agencies, public and private institutions. It has been repeated several times, public-private partnerships are essential, but we also have to consider the community-level development in order to ensure sustainability, keeping in mind that there is a great disconnect and that just building it will not have the tourists coming there. We absolutely need to have a clear story, a story that has been well designed around the space and the destination in order to have a successful project. But for this, it requires in all cases an adequate political framework in order to maintain the economic sustainability and the socio-ecological sustainability. A destination, it has been said, as being a collective economy of services and incentive system. It's a multi-stakeholder approach that then requires institutional building and capacity development. Summing it up, a destination is business together plus products and services. I will add to that the consumers. And all this gives a clear picture of what would it mean in terms of consumption and production patterns. If you conserve properly, you can be rewarded. This could be a nice principle, but still you need governments and institutions who would be able to implement it. Some countries have been doing it. We can learn from them and try to see how we can engage better tourism in the sustainable supply chain management. But all in all, we need the right education level, good marketing and communication tools in order, again, to establish the adequate understanding for a circular economy and lifestyle in which the tourism is evolving. We should not forget that the natural environment is and will remain the main asset of tourism. But for that, we need to understand properly what will be the ways and means to engage the private sector in these endeavors in order to have a win-win partnership. This is basically for conservation. Most of it will apply also for poverty. More than the first one, we need to understand better the linkages with poverty. Probably this has been a bit neglected because it's more sensitive, related to social issues, but this requires proper measurement tools, a proper measurement and reporting and verifying system. I like the idea of the tourist getting to the tourism factory and spending more, showing how important it can be as an industry. But like any industry, it has also to be given the human factor parameter. And in this case, trying to see how our sales of goods and services can take into account properly the poor, the economically poor, and give them priority as beneficiaries of the project. So not all pro-poor tourism strategies have been working if they do not consider seriously from the beginning what are the targets and how to reach out to the targets. This requires that all the stakeholders, all of them, will mainstream poverty reduction in their strategies in order to minimize the risk for the economically poor, who are almost all countries the bottom line of the projects. Measuring the trickle down from the projects to the poor is easy to conceive. So far it has been difficult to measure, but it is feasible and they are good projects. We need to look properly at the opportunities to create the additional income, and that this additional income has to be based on existing livelihood strategies and not to upset them, because they can, by disrupting them, we can just kill them in the near future. Pro-poor tourism strategies are a real opportunity for tourism to reduce poverty and to sustain development in a country. Many countries do rely to a large extent on tourism, and tourism at the bottom line that is linked to poverty. Reducing risk in this context, creating opportunity, capturing values is essential through a multi-stakeholder partnership. But this needs to be not only demonstrated, but then provide the condition for replications and scaling up. Unfortunately, in both cases, we don't have the right understanding, I repeated it, but also the right indicators. And we tend to focus much more on environmental indicators. We have been doing it, of course. This is our work, I would say, as UNEP, but closely with all other partners, and this is the purpose of green economy and all the discussion that we'll be having now in Rio, talking about the sustainable development goals beyond the Millennium Development Goals. We have to look also at the economic indicators in order to see how to lift up the poverty and ensure sustainability in the tourism sector. So diversification of activities and products is essential, and for that we need to see what is the best way to move from the command and control attitude to the market and voluntary measures, together with the right communication tools